Hi everyone, I do hope that this is going to work out. I've just tried it on my computer and my computer's having a few little glitches, so my apologies. I hope that everything else though does go accordingly. If necessary, I will do my best to make it work, okay? I'm doing a topic today and the topic is about souls, fragments, our missing shards and our missing pieces. So I do hope that those that join in today have the opportunity to connect. And I do apologize that, we are doing it in this particular platform today where it's on my phone. I can't really type properly while I'm doing all those extra bits and pieces. So welcome everybody. I do want you all to get yourselves a little bit comfortable because we are going to do a little bit of a meditation somewhere along the journey. I'm waiting on instruction from Spirit as to when that'll happen. But for those that are only just tapping in, the topic is soul fragments, missing shards, parts and pieces, okay? The main reason that I've particularly wanted to bring this topic up is because with a lot of domestic violence and a lot of breaking relationships, people often misunderstand the reason why someone might want to stay in a relationship that might not be healthy for them. And what a lot of people don't understand is many people stay in those unhealthy relationships because they actually want to stay near their parts and their pieces. And to help you better understand that, when our soul's been damaged in ways that often weaken us, parts of ourselves actually break away. The pieces of ourselves, they kind of get a little bit lost. And we as a soul become a little bit fragmented. When we lose those shards, it becomes very much a way in which we become a little bit fractured as a character, especially when they've been taken away or they've been shattered or they've been stolen or they've been removed by force. We begin to no longer feel complete. We make every attempt that we possibly can to hold on to them in any which way that we can. We almost at times do what would be considered the unthinkable. So we do not lose any or all of these pieces of ourselves. It is in our human nature to do what we can to stay near them, basically. And even if that means we stay near the enemy or stay with others who are in a relationship with us, which can be unhealthy, it can be very difficult to remove yourself out of that situation because your parts or your pieces are floating around perhaps that negative character or that wrong person. So significant aspects of our personality or our natural personal nature can become fragmented. And even our basic survival skills can become a bit foreign. The ability to then understand our natural senses, whether it to be trust our instinct, whether it to be engaging with our intuition, even when it's safe to act sometimes, it can be very difficult. We can become distraught and the difference of knowing then what is right or what is wrong for us can actually become a little bit diluted. So when we think about people who might be in a very bad or unhealthy relationship, we can be sitting back as the observer and thinking, oh my God, he does this, or oh my God, she does that. Why are you still with this person? Knowingly that they're creating so much damage. But when our shards and parts and pieces actually become missing, or it's been broken down so much over time, we actually lose a depth perception of self-awareness. The understanding of self then and how to navigate through the many different or difficult aspects of those relationships, the boundaries and the dynamics of it, it can become very complex. Relationships themselves, as we all know, are very complicated, but when the soul goes through loss, where we experience the lost shards can become in many forms in our lifetime. So it's not like it's just one shard or it's only one element of ourselves. Someone's just posted here, hi Kitty, how are you, darling? I hope you can hear me. you know, you were saying here, you know, you're an empath, and that, you know, you've been divorced and in a narcissistic relationship for over 2 years. There probably was many times in that relationship where you ended the relationship a multitude of different times, but because of your parts and pieces being held onto by that other character, it would have been quite difficult to just completely walk away. So when we think about these relationships, it's really easy to kind of be the observer and be a little bit judgmental and say, oh, you should have left a long time ago, or you should have disconnected from them. But it's not that simple. To disconnect from a negative person also means disconnecting from parts of ourselves. So that's what I'm basically trying to explain here. This can happen in so many forms in our lifetime, as I was saying before. As early from birth, it can occur, such as a lack from a parental nurture, for example. There can also be other aspects of emotional trauma that can come up for a parent, such as a mother or even a father. That type of disconnect can create a craving to want those pieces of your puzzle. So say, for example, as the adult version of somebody, they may then constantly seek that validation from their parent. They might then say, I really want to have a meaningful relationship with my parent, even though there's this rejection, or even though there's this abandonment, constantly then craving that relationship over and over again, because parts and pieces of themselves do feel missing. Now, there is a process in that transparency, I suppose, where every emotional experience by that mother can also be transferred to that child as well. So even well before the child is born, there is a built-in layer of emotion that actually hasn't been digested properly, because the mother's emotional transparency hasn't necessarily been handed over with information and knowledge. It's all done with sensory. So there's this personal vibration or energy through perhaps voice, or perhaps through a sense of smell, or a number of different senses, where even that mother's fragrance might be enough to trigger a trauma for that young child. So there's a multitude of different things that can happen. So therefore, the mother's fragments, or her parts and pieces, are all entwined with that child's parts and pieces as well. And again, that becomes kind of like another complex topic in short, because those soul connections and those experience for the soul loss can, in a way, already have happened in utero development. So it becomes this whole layer of different shards and different pieces and different fragments that are lost way back then. Which also leads us to the topic of cords that might need to be cut from certain people, where there is issues that have presented in early childhood, and can also even be right before we've entered into today's physical world. So a lot can happen even in that spiritual connection. Now, probably one of my common asked questions is whether or not, is it possible, or is there a way that we can gather those fragments and those shards and those pieces? Now, there is a belief it's possible for the soul fragments to find their way back to their owner in their own natural organic accord. However, more often it's not really the case, okay? And it requires work, and it requires effort on healing the self, developing and discovering the core self, and establishing where and when the shards and fragments, parts or pieces were lost. Now, during emotional or physical trauma, the PTSD, for example, can lead to a lifetime of feeling incomplete, especially if the trauma has been locked away. There can be almost like a soulful unwillingness to want to unpack it again, to understand it, and then have clarity and I guess in a way a relationship with that past, in order to then pack it all up again and then try to move on and live a normal life. So again, it's very, very complex. there is probably a natural willingness that we all go through where we actually want to leave that past in the past. The idea or the concept of collecting one's fragments, shards, parts, and pieces is actually often overlooked. It can be dismissed. In truth, it's probably quite unknown to many people that they may need to do this, okay? They may need to go and get all their bits and pieces. And the reason for that is probably the feeling of being incomplete can come in a multitude of different settings in life, and maybe more commonly found from an abusive situation, for example. It can come from the death of a loved one. It can come from grief of a child. It can even come from divorce or ambiguous pain where you lose somebody, but you still have to have some contact with them. And often that can be broken down families or things like that. It can also come from a sudden shock to the system, or even a psychic attack can create these situations or scenarios where we lose those parts and we lose those pieces of ourselves. What happens then is there's almost like an ache within the soul. And it's an ache that cannot be necessarily explained, right? A longing for something that feels almost abstract, really, in its tapestry, in the fiber of the individual, which in ways it cannot conceivably be identified in just a few simple words. Like I'm doing my best to kind of, condense everything here. But I can't say it's something that's easily summarized or explained on a basic notion. Your gathered information, yes, can come from textbooks, and it can come from other bits and pieces, I guess, that you might read along the way. But really, there is no true book on life, right? So in modern terms, I suppose the best way for me to sort of explain things is a mental breakdown or a nervous breakdown, or maybe even more commonly these days, it would be known as anxiety or depression. With a mental breakdown, the terms used to describe that period in somebody's life has become extremely intense due to maybe overload and stress, for example. Once used back in the older days more widely to suggest a range of mental health issues, for example, and a variety that now is probably broken up and they all sort of stand alone, which is your anxiety and depression, for example. As mental breakdowns suggest, it's the mental crisis that would last for maybe a few hours, maybe a week, and it can vary, of course, from person to person. The thing is that as we go through those mental breakdowns, or we go through something of that sort of level of trauma, the shards, the parts, the pieces of ourselves, they actually almost like in a sense of a vortex feel like they're moving further and further and further away from us, which is also similar then with your nervous breakdowns, where, again, even harder to explain historically, as it's not as easily diagnosed back in those earlier days. When we look at the nervous breakdown, the diagnosed under the banners of mental health, of course, but back then, terms, descriptions, duration wasn't so simple to say, okay, this is how long that nervous breakdown will go for, or this is how long the mental or emotional part of that will be. But if we really dig a little bit deeper, both mental and nervous breakdowns were seen back in the old days as hysteria, okay? And more simply, emotional excessive behavior where a person was physically out of control. Now, when trauma back in those days couldn't be identified because the soul was so beside itself, right? Personality disorders, schizophrenia would develop, or other worst case scenarios where the shards and the fragments, the parts and pieces would replace themselves in ways for the soul to adapt, to create a method of coping in a person's day-to-day life. Now, the soul damage that, how can I say, it's a soul's way of replenishing and repairing to give the identity to other fragments, parts and pieces that have in many ways often saved or in a way perhaps offered a safety for the separation of the other parts. So in modern terminology, I guess, it manifests itself in other ways. So now when we lose our shards, parts and pieces, it may form in something like chronic depression. It may form in other illnesses that are equally as debilitating, and can more so become very unnoticed or even untreated. Now, souls and fragments, parts and pieces, when they're missing, can actually be hidden in plain sight, almost like they lay dormant in a way, and then in a way becoming maybe to the surface, presenting as something else is probably what I'm trying to get to here. So a host of different elements from immune deficiencies, for example. It can display itself as suicidal tendency. It can display itself as addictions in many forms. It can even translate itself in sexual disorientation, and it can be drugs and alcohol, or I kind of feel that a lot of the time we're missing the reason why those addictions are coming in, and that is because a shard or a part or a piece of us is missing, and so we want to fill the void with something else, right? We want to bring that something else into our equation, so that we can feel a little bit of something, right? This can also be translated now in modern terms, again, thinking about the younger generation, with mental health and so forth. There seems to be a bit more of a thread of things such as self-harm, other things that now come to the surface because they don't understand that a part of themselves is missing, or there's a part that's fragmented now. So often unnoticed by the person themselves too. They might not even realize why they're putting themselves through such a level of suffering, or how they may be masking it from one thing to another, often because they don't want it to be detected. They don't want other people to know that they feel this level of incomplete. Now, when we think about these shards and these parts and pieces, I mean, there's probably a multitude of different parts of ourselves where we feel like, you know, if I had have stayed in that relationship, maybe it could have worked. Maybe if I had have tried harder, maybe if I had have done this, maybe if I had have done that, the relationship would have been a better relationship. So again, we're looking outside of ourselves for the things that perhaps could have made that relationship better. But in reality, the parts of ourselves, we can't just fill the void like that. It just doesn't work. So as a trained shaman, I strongly believe that if over a course of time, if one soul has had too many fragments, shards or parts and pieces, as I was saying, missing from their human body or whatever, their soul's existence, if you will, the ultimate end result becomes death, right? And I feel that's because through manifestation of illness, it could be cancer, or it could be other terminal health matters, even one's own hand, which is going back to the unfortunate sensation of wanting to end things in the most dramatic acting out process that is available, which is of course suicide, by even living through forms of addiction. These are all elements of acting out. And when we are missing a part of ourselves and we can't communicate it verbally, we can't express ourselves in a way that helps us to express that to other people, to say, hey, I feel a little bit missing here, or I feel like something's not quite right in me. How do I go about my everyday existence, right? Because we are here having a human experience, right? I tend to find there are a multitude of different levels that people go through, and addiction is one of those forms, as I was saying before, because it gives the ability to escape all senses of reality. You no longer have to be in touch with your physical self. You can, in a way, have that out-of-body experience, which of course is a whole nother topic for me to get into at another time. But you can vacate that physical body that doesn't feel like all its parts are together. Now, the soul, in a way, vacates the host, right? So you as the person is the host. During that state of induced altered state of mind or physical existence or whatever it might be that relates to yourselves. But inside of all of that, it's this multitude of different things that are going on because we're wanting to fill the void, right? That's constantly what's going on here. Now, in particular with domestic violence and abusive relationships, whether it's mental abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, even soulful abuse, which is where somebody genuinely doesn't understand the concept of you, right? There are many methods of healing, right? And through that healing process, we can aid, okay, the ability to gather up those missing fragments and the shards and the parts and pieces. And please do remember that today I am doing my best to condense this topic, right? It's a huge topic. It's not something I can really put into a small box for everybody. I want to scratch the surface with you all so that you can understand it a little bit. So let's say now, if a significant amount of shards have been lost, it can be hard to reunite them, okay? It can be very difficult to go and gather up all of those parts and return it to the soul. Soul retrieval work can be done, but before that healing can really commence, like before you can really get into it, the soul must be well enough, first of all, must be willing enough, second of all, and then able and genuinely ready. Because when you start to explore into the depth, into the real deep-seated pain that has caused these tears or caused these shards and caused these parts and pieces to break away from you, those holes, those splits or whatever destroyed that part of the soul so severely that it ripped away from the aura, its protective layer, it does take a mountain load of work to bring it all back, okay? Now, of course, we're not going to get through that in one session tonight. It's obviously not the way that we're going to do this because there's so many other things that we need to take into consideration, right? It depends on circumstances. If it unconsciously we placed it with somebody else for safekeeping, such as a parent. So sometimes it could be a friend, it could be a mentor. We could have given that shard or given that piece of ourselves to somebody else for them to take care of it because it could be too painful to take care of it for ourselves. Do you understand this? Okay. Now, if it was taken from us without our will, or if it was from an ongoing situation too painful, too horrific, too traumatizing to even want to revisit, there can be a good reason that we don't want to return for those fragments or shards, parts and pieces, right? Also, I guess it would be reliving the experience over again. And in some, I think that ordeal may be too much to face again. You know, I think that could be traumatic. Now, I kind of want to break it down a little bit and use a slightly better example. I don't want to touch on anything that may be too sensitive to the viewers today. I want to try to kind of summarize but give enough information and still kind of get you to have a better understanding of where we're going with this. But I want to use an example, as I said before, and I apologize in advance now if this might be distressing or maybe too much for anybody that's viewing. There are no graphs in my example, but it may still rise or bring up certain emotions that are unwanted, or thoughts or whatever that might be unwanted. If you want to mute and return, you're welcome to do so. And maybe I'll give something as a signal to say that I'm no longer sort of discussing that. So what I'll do then, when I'm done talking about that particular topic, I'll just hold up my pendulum just so that we know that you can come back in. So one of the examples that I would like to use is non-consensual sex, right? Now, I want to make it very clear, non-consensual sex is never okay, right? This behavior is not condoned, and I want to make it clear, used here only for assistance with understanding, okay? And in no way does the example make allowances or excuses for any act of violence and the nature of the crime, okay? We want to make sure that that's understood, okay? Should an unfortunate event occur of a person being sexually assaulted by more or one offender, their fragments, shards, parts, and pieces may now be held hostage, or in a way, kidnapped by the perpetrators, okay? Now, those fragments, parts, pieces, whatever word you want to use, of their soul ruptured, tore, split off during that traumatic experience, right? That shattering experience happened on every level imaginable, treated, however, more often for the physical or the emotional or the psychological component of the trauma. Now, often, and more often than not, unfortunately, the spiritual trauma is overlooked. And therefore, that process of healing is so prolonged. It's way back there after an incident actually comes up for anybody, right? Now, it as a healer, as a psychic, as a medium, as a instrument for spirit, which is the labels that I go by, I really don't care about those labels. What is important here is the most frustrating part for someone like myself is by the time that something like that has occurred, we are at the last entail, right? They've been to the psychologist, they've been to the counselor, they've been to all these multitude of different options, but they're not actually in a position to collect the shards, parts, and pieces, right? It all gets buried, it all gets pushed really, really deep, 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 way back there. And in particular, this happens so much for children, okay? I apologize, anybody that did want to come back. We're now kind of back on track to the topic. So their ability, whether it be a child, whether it be an adult, whether it be even an elderly person, their true ability to live in a healthy, functioning relationship can in fact become very complex. While they'll continue to journey, they'll appearingly fit into the normal world as it presents itself to them, they will perhaps continue to walk not feeling whole, no matter how much therapy has been conducted post that experience. Now, when we think back to their internal conflict, right, because this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the internal conflict. How can I put this? All of those internal conflicts will have weakened their immune system, their natural ability to function, because all of the situation as a whole, right, begins to forever plague them, right? Whether it's an intrusion of thoughts, whether it's a diluted version of themselves of what could have been or what should have been, all of that sort of stuff, right? There is multitude of different things that can go on, and blame and shame and anger, I think, are just some of the surface emotions that might display to what is known and often referred to as acting out. And this occurs when the words don't work to express an emotion. So an acting out, such as shattering a glass, or breaking a window, or stomping, or yelling, or screaming, is what's kind of left for a person that's gone through such a trauma, because that's all they've got left to express, that they've been shattered. Okay. That shattered, colourful illusion, I suppose, of knowing that it could never be put back together, goes all the way to the core of them, to every fibre and existence of their soul. When lashing out in self-harm no longer eases their pain, or addiction may be one of the many ways that they've tried to fill the void, left by missing and lost fragments, when the attempts no longer work, the multitude of endless new coping mechanisms don't work. They've been tried, they've been tested, they've been searched for, and probably in many ways even eroded the person even more so, because then they're stuck with failure and success, and even only short terms of feeling that it works, and then other methods of looking at how we can ease the distress. So it kind of yo-yos for these people. So compensating with multitude of different habits that are quick to have and give short-term fixes, but often then can lead to new and further, sometimes greater losses of fragments and greater losses of parts and pieces, because ultimately they're aiming to have some personal power over their body. And once again, they're actively being the person that wants to decide what happens to them. You know, they want to be able to say, hey, this is my body, I own it, I'm responsible for it. And their personal human wants to feel like what consumes them is ultimately theirs. You know, they want to be able to dictate how much and how often. So all these layers of addiction can also be because of those missing parts, shards and pieces, which is the topic of tonight. So ultimately, when those shards are broken, missing parts, pieces, all gone from the soul, a lot of different things can lead a character or a person to then actually be more vulnerable. It can lead them to be a little bit more stuck in illness and feel a little bit more, hi Nikki, how you doing, Dal? Be a little bit more weakened in their personality and even in their own personal energy. And therefore their aura ultimately becomes distraught. They might put themselves in situations of being perhaps more reckless, perhaps being more abusive, and sometimes no longer just self-abuse or allowing others to abuse, but also in turn becoming the abuser. So there's a multitude of different things that can happen when we become fractured and broken in such a way. Hi, everybody who's just joining in. Tonight's topic is parts, fragments and pieces. So when we lose our soul shards. Anyway, what many might not understand is there is a fate far worse than sexual assault, right? That might sound like a strange thing to say. However, it's the worst fate is knowing that those fragments, those shards, those parts, those pieces which are missing were a form of a life support. And on that day when something has happened to such a level of trauma, they actually went through a death, right? This is the saddest part. You actually do go through a form of death. And there is then this knowing inside of self that they will never be whole again. The configuration they knew themselves to be, to expand that memory of them prior to the moment in time, can never be again. So it becomes traumatic, no matter what. The soul's shredding of these parts, pieces and fragments, it's something that no matter what your trauma is, because we've all had different trauma, okay? Doesn't matter if it was prolonged abuse, such as found in a relationship where one party doesn't have the strength to leave, which is what we were talking a little bit about earlier in the domestic abuse component of this. A person in domestic violence, for example, they might share their story among family and friends and peers, not knowing that they have been in such a relationship, perhaps seen by others as toxic. The advice and the support to leave the environment and to no longer stand for the abuse very well might be healthy, might be positive, might be beneficial to the person. The observer may, as I said earlier, be frustrated, wanting them to leave, and not understanding the complexity of why a person stays. It appears that they're choosing to stay, when that's often not the case, right? Domestic violence isn't a simple situation of telling someone to leave, right? It can sound logical. However, it's never as simple as just leave, just pack your stuff and go, right? Some people might not genuinely think of their relationship in terms of unhealthy or abusive. They might not believe that they fit inside that profile. They might not look at their relationship and think it's that bad, right? The reason is because often, if there is no violence, the victim of emotional abuse, for example, can dismiss, even downplay. They maybe even don't believe it's as bad because it's not physical abuse. They can also personally be made to feel worthless and having a very low opinion of themselves, from having one's self-esteem so shattered and broken along the way. Their beliefs, their personal values can all be diminished, and it can also make them feel like it's impossible to start over again, right? Now, abuse can be minimized during the patterns and the cycle of abuse. So therefore, a false belief can be installed by, for example, the abuser doing something kind or loving or even apologetic, or maybe promising not to repeat the behavior or whatever. So again, the abuser questions the other characters, the person being abused questions the other person's better nature, right? Believing, oh, they'll do better next time, they've promised, etc. Leaving also can put a person in a sense of perhaps threatening situation. Often post-breakup actually is the most dangerous part of a relationship of that sort of nature, because the mental abuse and the physical, and of course soulfully, as I mentioned earlier, this is where the parts and pieces and the fragments are noticed the most. So creating a safety plan is a must, of course, and once the abuser has actually left, right, that's when that turning point can happen, where things can really escalate, right? Leading to those unfortunate fatal outcomes that we've all sadly seen on the news and so forth, right? Now, there's a level of control that goes on, of course, in abusive relationship and so on, that makes that plan to escape almost like a cycle, right? As I was saying before. And someone's just put here, having had a narcissistic mother, and of course, narcissism can happen in multitude of relationship. It's not always domestic violence in the terms of partner to partner. Domestic violence also occurs mother to child, child even to parent sometimes, and sometimes, of course, step families and blended families can have a lot of that. But again, topic for another day. So as we know, with those abusive relationships, right, they can escalate from the multitude of attempts that can be made to leave before that person finally is able to say, right, I'm leaving for good, right? But you can't always do that safely. So sometimes you need to outsource that safety network, right? But one of the hardest reasons to leave is because we are leaving a big part of ourselves with that abuser. We really are leaving so much there, which then goes into the whole, you know, gaslighting and so forth. But I'm not here to talk about the domestic violence part. I'm not even here to talk about the narcissistic part. What I want to do, while I've got another 15 minutes before I have to get kicked off here, is I want to talk a little bit about how do we bring some of those shards, parts, and pieces back. I'm a motor mouth, and any of my clients who happen to be watching tonight will know once spirit starts on a tangent, it's very hard to kick them off. But what I would like to do is just lead everybody through a real kind of quick mini meditation, okay? Please be aware that I've not done this meditation. This is a live feed, so it's basically what Spirit wants to do. And there is no failing this, okay? There is no being judged in this. There is no embarrassment. There is no shame. Nothing here is to be exposed, okay? I love that people have got on here and they have shared their own little personal stuff. And when I have the opportunity, I will sit down and I will read all of that. Probably won't be till tomorrow sometime, but I'll get there. What we want to do here is recognize that there are many things in life's relationships, okay, that can leave a part of us disconnected from ourselves, okay? So those who want to sit in with this little meditation, I'm going to ask you now to just find yourself a little comfy place, okay? Take a moment to settle yourselves in. If you're sitting on a chair, find one that does allow you to move yourself into the correct position for yourself to be in alignment, okay? Those who happen to be lying down or choosing to lie down, again, just trying to keep your hands by your side. It's okay in this meditation if you fidget, if you move, if you need to rub your nose, if you need to whatever. I'm not here to create strictness in meditation. We can do that in another topic if you like. But certainly not in this one, okay? Now, I don't use music in my meditation, but you will hear a pinging sound of me using my my happy over here. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, this is this big guy. And once you hear that sound, that's that time to put your mind into a little bit of quietness, okay? So creating a bit of stillness, all right? So just taking a moment to close your eyes, if you like, or open eye meditation, whatever is going to make you feel comfortable. This is a little meditation to help bring back your parts, pieces, your fragments that we've been talking about tonight. I would like you to just feel your toes relaxing. Feel your legs starting to relax. Feel your stomach and your upper torso and your arms and your hands all starting to relax. You might need to tense them and release them to get that true relax. If that's what you need to do, you go ahead and do that. There are no rules in this meditation, okay? We're going to open up our chakra system, and what I would like you to do in order to help that along is just take a few nice deep breaths. In through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Just feeling your body coming into that sense of peace with yourself. We're going to quickly open up our chakra system, starting at the base. I'm only going to rattle off the colours. Your soul will know exactly what it needs to do, starting with our red, our orange, our yellow, our green, our blue, our purple, our white. Just opening up all your chakra system there and just allowing that part of your whole entire soul and part of your whole entire being to recognize it's complete, okay? Now, I want you to visualize for me one person, try not to overload in this, okay? Just one person to whom you've given too much of your energy to. Perhaps it was a parent to whom keeps asking more of you than what you can give. Perhaps it's in a romantic relationship where you're no longer in that relationship, but you still feel traumatized by it. The relationship may have been abusive. The relationship may have been a relationship perhaps that was just mentally negative for you. Perhaps it wasn't bringing out the best of your personality. I want you to visualize that person, and I want you to stand in front of that person now in your visualization. And I don't want you to have a confrontation. I don't want you to have argument. I don't want you to have any negative feelings to this person. I want you to take that moment of looking at them in the eye and thanking them for the journey and the experience that was offered to you in that exchange, okay? Because the reason that you chose that partnership or that person or relationship is because there was a lesson to learn from it. So I want you to take a moment and just have gratitude for the lessons that you've learned. And I want you to breathe that positive part of that relationship in. And I want you to breathe all that negative out. And I want you to breathe that positive in of that relationship. And I want you to breathe all that negative out. And when you breathe in that positive, I want you to really recognize that that breath in is you breathing in all of your energy that you contributed into that relationship. And when you breathe that energy out, it's all the energy that they brought to the relationship. You are retrieving your energy of that relationship, and you're giving back their energy of that relationship. We aren't in this position to decide whether or not one person gave more or one person gave less, okay? That's not what we're looking for here. We're simply breathing in beautiful energy that already was ours. It's already your own energy. You are taking it back. It is your energy and you're taking it back. And I want you to know you do not need this person's permission. You do not need this person's okay. You do not need this person to know that you've gone to collect your belongings. This is no different to if you left your CD there and it was your favorite. You turn up on the doorstep, you make it amicable, you make the exchange nice, and you simply say, can I have my CD back? And in exchange, you hand them back perhaps something that was theirs, because we leave our parts, our pieces, and our shards with people. Now, today's meditation is just the energy of that. We can't get to the depth of all the parts and pieces and the fragments, but we can at least get the energy back. So breathe in that energy and feel yourself being empowered by what is all of yours. Release that energy and let it go. It doesn't belong to you. Breathe in your positive energy, bring it back to you, and let it go to the other person of what is theirs. It doesn't belong to you. And take in that last big breath and slowly let it out. Trust now your energy of those shards, parts, and pieces are complete. And I want you just to relax in that energy. Just feel yourself basking in your own energy. And then I slowly want you to come back to my voice, and we're just going to work down that chakra system again. We're going to shut that all down so that we're not walking around all open to everything. We're going to close the crown chakra, closing with beautiful white light. We're going to close the third eye chakra, beautiful violet light. We're going to close the throat chakra, the beautiful basking blue sea. We're going to close the heart chakra, the beautiful trees of Mother Nature. We're going to close down into our solar plexus and into our sacral and right down into our base chakra, each color, yellow and orange and red. And we're going to come back to today's little topic. When you're all ready, shake yourselves out, feel your legs, feel your arms, pinch yourself if you need to, because it's kind of nice to feel a little bit whole again. For those who came in last minute, tonight's topic has been about parts, pieces, shards, parts of the soul that go missing when we give ourselves or others take from us in a way that is not rightfully theirs, okay? So much more to this topic, and unfortunately I just cannot summarize it in an hour. It's impossible. I have put a little notation to the side of myself, the last major topic that I left off on, which was gaslighting, and hopefully next week I can come back to talking a little bit more about this particular topic. I do thank everybody for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to bring a little bit of this topic to the surface. Please know that this topic is a really big one, because it also goes into talking about how our chakra system, it's not always running the way that it should because of those parts and pieces that are missing. How when we do chakra healing, the pendulum sways in different ways because of a tear or a break in those areas, and how also the energy spills out of our aura because of those broken parts, pieces and shards. While it would be lovely to make peace with everybody that has ever taken of us unwillingly or taken of us in a way that's been abusive or negative, we can't always make that happen. Now, what I do ask is that regardless of whether or not somebody has done you wrong on this earth, please remember that life is just an experience, okay? Don't label it good, don't label it bad, just experience. We're here for a human experience, and we're here for a human existence, and none of us are perfect. We've all got faults, we've all got flaws, we've all got broken shards, we've all got broken pieces, and we are looking for our parts and pieces along the journey. And I do hope that you have the opportunity to go through that little meditation that we did. I'm going to have to play the meditation back to myself at some point and write it down, because all my stuff is live. It's literally what Spirit is handing over at that given time. I did hope to do a little mini read for somebody inside of the session today, but unfortunately I've not got the time to include that. Hopefully next week, when we get back to the topic and get back to the discussion, there may be that opportunity. Please feel free to leave any comments, constructive and or otherwise. Please remember that the information that I share with you is directly from Spirit. It's not Hayley, okay? I'm an instrument for Spirit. Therefore, I don't actually know at this point what's been shared with you. I will come back to replaying it, as I said. I, at this stage, don't necessarily have a true opinion of what's been shared here, but I do hope that whatever Spirit has shared with you today is something that you can relate to on some level. Please remember that the messages today are heaven sent. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about me, you can do so by having a look at my Facebook page, which is Hayley David, International Psychic Medium. Heavenly Connected is also another way to look me up. I do look forward to you guys joining next week. Yeah, tough topic for a lot of people, and I do apologize, as I said earlier, for anybody that this topic may have brought some trauma up. Of course, if you wish to further connect with me in relation to this particular topic, please feel free to private message me. Please don't do that through my personal page. Please use Spirit Event Directory, or alternatively Heavenly Soul Connected in the Facebook page there. Wishing everybody a great start to February. I do hope that all goes well. Stay safe and take care of each other and yourself. Thank you.